And what about the upheaval that's going on in America right now? What do you predict for that?
You know, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I remember the protests and I remember the good that came from that. I wouldn't be in television, I wouldn't have the job that I have today had it not been for a group of radical Mexican Americans who started protesting and challenging the licenses of radio and television stations because they weren't hiring a staff that reflected the population that they were serving. You know, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, used to say that the airwaves, you know, that we listen to and watch on television belong to the people of America. They don't belong to Disney or Comcast or General Electric. And therefore, the stations, radio and television stations, should hire a staff on the air that reflects the population of the city they're serving. In my town of San Antonio, 60% of the population is Hispanic. So, and yet there were very few people who looked like me. But thanks to those protests, these guys started challenging the licenses of radio and TV stations. They called themselves, these guys, the Brown Berets. And they actually called themselves the BBC. These protesters called themselves the BBC, the Bilingual Bicultural Coalition on the Mass Media. And their intent was to get more people like me on the air. And thank God for them. When I was 18, I got my first internship at a country music radio station and got my start in broadcasting. So I see a lot of good that can come from this. I applaud the protesters as long as it's not violent, you know. But even then you understand the anger after so many years, so many decades of being told that things will change and yet they don't. So my hope is that this time it's made a difference.
Your father at times was a migrant worker, and you sometimes traveled with him, right?
Well, my father picked cotton growing up in South Texas, and when I was 13, we became migrant farm workers. He was laid off from work as a janitor. My mom used to clean houses on the rich part of town in San Antonio. And when he was laid off, my two sisters, my mother and father, and I got on the back of these trucks with strangers. And we journeyed as migrant farm workers all the way from San Antonio, 1,700 miles to Northport, Michigan, the cherry capital of the world, where we picked cherries for 75 cents a bucket. And then we, like all migrant farm workers, you follow the crops. And by the way, I've heard that as high as 90% of farm workers in Florida anyway have contracted the virus.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because of lack of protection?
Yeah. And they're moving, you know, they got to keep moving.
And you think it's because nobody cares?
No, I mean, that's clearly the case. I mean, who do they see? They don't have insurance.
How do we get to this place in society where nobody cares? Or have we always been there?
I think we've always been that way. I think a certain percentage of us anyway, and it's coming to roost. But yeah, we picked tomatoes and cherries in Michigan and Ohio, and that's when I learned that I wanted something better out of life and go to college.
Right. And you did it.
Well, thank God for government programs. There was something called Upward Bound, which was a government program that allowed kids like me from the inner city to get extra courses in math, biology, and English to help me prepare to go to college, because the government knew that my inner city school was doing a lousy job of preparing me for college. And I was the first one in my family. I was the first generation college student. So thank God for that government program that today people would call welfare or a government handout. For me, it was literally a lifeline. If it wasn't for Upward Bound, I wouldn't be here today.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a message or a hope that you would want people to hear about America in the future?
I do this show called What Would You Do, right? It's a show that shines a light on discrimination and racism and bullying. And my message is pretty simple. Put yourselves in the shoes of the victim. Only then do we understand what it's like. If you can pause for a moment. Because we all judge by appearances, right? We all do it. I do it, you do it. It's embedded in our DNA, this instinct to judge someone as soon as you meet them by the way they're dressed, by the color of their skin, by the accent in their voice. We have to stop ourselves, literally. It was embedded in our DNA because that was a matter of survival back when we lived in caves, right? We had to decide what we could eat or what might eat us. And so therefore, the hair on the back of your neck stands up when you see something that might seem strange, dangerous, or threatening. I think the key is to stop ourselves in that moment and say, wait a minute, why am I presuming the worst of this person just because of the way they look, or because of the accent, the way they talk, right? And if you do that and you realize that these folks are human beings just like you are, who want the same things for their families as you and I might want, who have the same dreams and wishes and wants and aspirations, maybe then we'll be less likely to judge. And that's the key.